Hello again, welcome to the second devlog of a currently untitled game. I want to decide on a name soon. I was thinking Night Shift would be a really clever name, but I looked it up and it's already taken by a game from 2003. Then I thought of A Night Alone, which I think could also work, but I don't want to decide just yet. Anyways, as a recap of last devlog, I was left with an arena to fight waves of enemies and randomly generated dungeons and items. So 1 week ago, the game didn't really feel fun, which is important to most people. Before I got to the fun though, I had to take care of some things. I did a lot of behind the scenes stuff to make it easier to add new content in the future, which I won't bother to go into right now. I also added a few things to make the game feel less disorienting. I added a mini-map for the dungeon that uncovers as you go so you don't get lost. I also added a main menu with cool shiny effects to make it feel alive. I always love when main menus of a game feel satisfying. It somehow makes the whole thing a lot better. I made the screen wiggle with your mouse, added a glowing crystal with particle effects, and made the buttons feel nice to hover over. Now here's where things change a lot. I completely changed my opinion on how the game will go. Here's a basic overview of what I settled on. A player starts a run. They're in the middle of an arena, tasked with defending the crystal. Nothing new so far. There's an entrance to a dungeon next to them. Here's what's different. The player has to choose when to go into the dungeon themselves. There's no longer a definite switch between arena and dungeon phase. To aid this, I'm making towers a big part of the game. You can fortify your crystal to a point where you feel comfortable to leave it alone, and then go into the dungeon and get stronger and stronger. Every 5 or so waves, there will be an extra long break between the waves, just to allow the player a chance to breathe and venture into the dungeon. Once I decided this, I quickly started to add everything needed to achieve some basic gameplay of this idea. I added a new item type, towers, with the first one being a ballista, very inspired from Dungeon Defenders. It looks nice and medievally, so it's perfect for this game. It shoots a bolt, has a short delay to recharge, then shoots again. Next, I decided to put down a ton of them for fun. Now that fun is over, I added the necessary UI to be able to click on a tower and place it down. Okay, but the waves never get harder, so what's the point of collecting towers? There is no point, so I rewrote the wave generator. Here's how it works. The wave generator gets a power limit of enemies it can spawn, starting at 1,000 points. Each enemy has an assigned power cost. I gave slimes 500 points and archers 2,000 points. Every wave it'll randomly spawn enemies until it runs out of points and wait until the next wave, when it'll have even more points to spend. Next, I merged the dungeon scene and the arena scene into one, which had a few bugs that had to be sorted out, but eventually it worked smoothly. Right now you just swap between the two with R, but eventually I'll add a door or tunnel or something that you have to enter into from the arena. Next, I added a little counter in the bottom left that tells you when the next wave will spawn, so you aren't completely clueless while you're in the dungeon. Next, I wanted to add some incentive to actually kill enemies, since right now they're just annoyances. So I added money. Enemies drop money. Where do you spend this money? Good question. At a shop, obviously. The items on the shop floor cost a certain amount of money to buy, depending on the rarity and strength. There's a little shopkeeper in the middle that just kind of stares and blinks. All of the items at the shop have a rarity boost so that there's actually a point to spend money on them. Around the same time, I also made a custom editor for items so I can make them in a non-confusing way. Now that I did this, it allowed me to add custom item effects. Remember relics? The items that you can hold 3 of that grant more unique boosts? I finally made one of those. It's called Crystal Fragment Necklace, so I could steal this necklace sprite I made earlier. The idea is that it makes the crystal absorb some of the damage you take, but in exchange the crystal takes all your health regen as well. I added it in, and it honestly kind of feels broken since the player can just die and regen all their health anyways, but that's an issue for another day. Then I made the UI not look like it was made in a few minutes, which it was. I added tabs at the top to swap between different menus and made it fit the game style much more. On top of that, I added a box that pops up when you hover over an item giving you a description of it that tells you all the stats and effects it has. Next, I started to playtest the game a bit. I realized that after about 5 minutes, I run out of dungeon to explore. To fix this, I added a ladder room that just regenerates the dungeon when you use it. Eventually, I'll make deeper levels in the dungeon be different in some way though. I also made it so the shopkeeper can sell towers. I made a spreadsheet to write down notes for each test attempt I played. After just one playthrough, I made a ton of good changes using this method. One thing I realized is that I have no idea what's happening to my crystal while I'm in the dungeon. I added a feature where when you press Alt, it flicks your camera over to the crystal so you can spectate it. In the next run, I realized that items are broken. I got an item that gave me 93% dodge chance, basically making me invincible. So I decided it was time to rewrite the formulas for stat generation. I made it so all weapons have a base damage and attack speed stat, and all armor has a base health and armor stat. Then they can have bonus stats depending on the rarity. Eventually, red tier items will have unique effects, but not yet. I also made towers rarer since I was getting like 1 per minute, which would eventually just completely flood the arena. After these changes and a lot of bug fixing, the game felt much more balanced. Now there was a new issue that became apparent. There just wasn't much variety. There's only a handful of rooms and items and only 2 enemies. While this may seem like a bad thing at first, it's also very exciting. Now is the time where I can really be creative and start designing the game rather than just adding new features. To celebrate, I added 2 new towers and a new relic. The first tower is a flame tower. It shoots a fireball that explodes into an inferno, damaging enemies in a large radius over time. It took a while to make it look right, and it can still get a little messy looking. Let me know what you guys think of it. The second tower is a healing tower. It shoots a healing bullet at the crystal that creates a healing aura. The player can get healed by this too. These 2 towers are quite overpowered, so I'll make sure they're rare enough or just make them start off weaker. I think they're really satisfying to use though. And finally, the relic. I wanted to make the player feel ultra mobile, able to move through the dungeon with much less struggle. I named it Spectral Step because it sounds cool, then I made a sprite for it. It gives a 50% boost to move speed and makes the player knockback immune. It's definitely as fun as I imagined it to be. Anyways, that's all the progress I made in the last week. This game has been so much fun to make so far, and as I keep making it, I only get more ideas of cool things to add. I'm honestly surprised with the amount of motivation I've had to keep working on this project. I do think that sometimes I can get sloppy while adding features since I'm just so excited to get them working, so I'll have to spend some time cleaning up the code. Other than that, I would say the next week I'm going to work on adding some item and enemy variety, as well as design a bunch of new and unique rooms so the map feels less boring. Also, the game doesn't have any sounds right now, so I might spend some time on that too. Anyways, thank you all for watching to the very end. If the game looks interesting to you, I encourage you to subscribe and follow along with the series. See you all in the next one.